There's nothing like an ice-cold Miller Lite. It's Miller time.
Are you ready to get your groove on?
Yes.
All right then, let's get started.
I know that you got a job, Miss Cheney, but your husband's heart problem's complicated. So the FCC won't let me be me, so let me see.
Push me, and then just touch me, till I can get my satisfaction. 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 Satisfaction.
Push me, and then just hurt me, till I can get my satisfaction. Satisfaction. Satisfaction.
If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up.
To never forget the nights of people that I never met. We want the matches and all that we get. So fighting the ship on a terrorist flip.
War has been declared upon the United States of America and everybody in it. This war has been declared by the evil army that controls this country, the Cassius Cartel, the American Illuminati, the powers that be. They plan to kill you, control you, or incarcerate you. And it's soon.
Never no more fighting with label execs. I'd rather fight for the Peruvian peasant that's stressed, for the Palestinian who's occupied and oppressed, for the rights of those people whose fortune is less. And this I dedicate to those in guerrilla war that have chosen to fight against unjust law, against the CIA who flew coke and raw. Hey, I guess when it rains it pours, because they used Saddam and his clan to battle Iran. To crush Russia they used the holy war Afghans. Now they kill and maim in them same lands, same countries who carried out those master plans. It's a rage against a machine that stage coups in countries that left innocent ones caged like monkeys.
Many Americans would be surprised to learn that the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution, nor does it appear in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. The founders did everything they could to keep us from having a democracy. James Madison, rightly known as the father of the Constitution, wrote in essay number 10 of the Federalist Papers, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." Alexander Hamilton agreed, and he stated, "We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy." Samuel Adams, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." The founders had good reason to look upon democracy with contempt, because they knew that the democracies in the early Greek city-states produced some of the wildest excesses of government imaginable. In every case, they ended up with mob rule, then anarchy, and finally tyranny under an oligarchy. During that period in Greece, there was a man named Solon, who urged creation of a fixed body of law not subject to majority whims. But where the Greeks never adopted Solon's wise counsel, the Romans did. Based on what they knew of Solon's laws, they created the 12 tables of the Roman law, and in effect, built a republic that limited government power and left the people alone. Since government was limited, the people were free to produce, with the understanding that they could keep the fruits of their labor. In time, Rome became wealthy and the envy of the world. In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed. They forgot that the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. When government power grows, people freedom recedes. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman Constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet, and they went on the dole. Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security. Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars. Thus, democracy itself is not a stable form of government. Instead, it is the gradual transition from limited government to the unlimited rule of an oligarchy. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite. Just as there is widespread confusion regarding political systems, there is similar confusion in the economic arena. All during the 20th century, Americans were led to believe that there was a great struggle going on between capitalism and the communist world. Undoubtedly a struggle existed, but the real adversaries were rarely identified properly.
Why aren't we directly helping homeowners with their debt burden? Why aren't we helping American families faced with bankruptcy? Why aren't we reducing debts for Main Street instead of Wall Street? Isn't it time for fundamental change in our debt-based monetary system so we can free ourselves from the manipulation of by the Federal Reserve and the banks? Is this the United States Congress or the Board of Directors of Goldman Sachs?
Thomas Jefferson wrote, "If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children will wake up homeless on the continents their fathers occupied."
See, what the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 did was give this private banking cartel total monopoly of printing money. So what you had here was a complete takeover of the government of the United States by these private bankers. They've owned it ever since.
100 years after Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln was pondering the same issues when he said, "The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency. Creating and issuing money is the supreme prerogative of government and its greatest creative opportunity. Adopting these principles will save the taxpayers immense sums of interest, and money will cease to be the master and become the servant of humanity."
Every $100 bill which the Federal Reserve System prints and is sold to the United States at full face value represents a $100 loan. Even though the government pays for it, they still pay interest, and it becomes, that's what your $4 trillion debt is, are the Federal Reserve notes.
What do the fears expressed by Jefferson and Lincoln have to do with today's murmurings about something called the New World Order?
And incidentally, it was Woodrow Wilson who first proclaimed the New World Order. It was the creation of the Federal Reserve that overthrew the traditional American system, the traditional government of the United States.
There is a controversy raging everywhere in America today. Everywhere, that is, except in our major media.
This chamber should be a chamber where we have the opportunity to speak truth to power.
I watched the Republican debate, and I saw this guy, Ron Paul. He's my new hero. You just never heard this logic from someone who's actually going to run the country.
If you could confront Mr. Obama tomorrow, how would you pin him down when he uses that word change?
Well, I probably wouldn't do it directly as much as I would go to his supporter if I was addressing supporters of the audience. That change means nothing. It's just a word, and it's a cliche. And just to repeat it has no meaning. You have to say, what are you going to change? And I would argue, you offer no change. You have the same foreign policy. You want more troops in Afghanistan. You're not talking about only going to war with a declaration. You don't want to deal with the monetary, financial crisis in this country. You want to keep, the system together for the benefit of the banks and the big corporations and the politicians, that argument.
This administration has turned the patient art of diplomacy on its head. Turned the patient art of diplomacy into threats, labeling and name-calling of the sort that reflects quite poorly on the intelligence and sensitivity of our leaders, and which will have consequences for years.
You're basically saying that we should take our marching orders from Al-Qaeda. If they want us off the Arabian Peninsula, we should leave?
No! I'm saying we should take our marching orders from our Constitution. We should not go to war. We should not go to war without a declaration. We should not go to war when it's an aggressive war. This is an aggressive invasion. We've committed the invasion of this war, and it's illegal under international law. That's where I take my marching orders, not from any enemy.
Over this way.